Five, four, three, two, one. We have ignition. Strap in. You're about to listen to the hottest sounds.
Dream Catcher Radio.
Sometimes when you're in a dark place, you think you've been buried, but actually, you've been planted.
Well, I won't back down. No, I won't back down. You could stare me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. No, I'll stand my ground. Won't be turned around, and I'll keep this world from dragging me down. Gonna stand my ground.
Okay, we are back for the Christie Injustice Case, episode number 39. I'm actually joined today by a different guest, gentleman by the name, I'm definitely need it slightly wrong, so I apologise, Charles Xenakis, who lives in Crete, and he knows Ralph Christie, and they're running parallel paths by the sounds of it. Charles, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Charles, the best way, what I'd like to do is beforehand, because you've got quite an interesting journey yourself, where we were just talking off air just now, where you were born in England. So to start off with that little story over now, you started getting into property development and that sort of stuff as well, and when you moved to Crete, in the format that you see fit.
Yeah, I was born in London. My father was actually a political exile from Cyprus. A couple of years after Cyprus gained independence from the UK. In fact, he was quite politically active. So I do come from something of a political background. I love London. I have travelled extensively. I've studied in the States, worked throughout Europe. When my family was still quite young, I had two children under the age of 3. I moved over to Crete. This would have been in 2003. And I've been here ever since.
Okay. Did you say you had two children at what? Under the age of 3, did you say?
Yes, that's when I moved over here. I think it was a decision made that London lost its spontaneity, really, with children. For myself, and in any case, I always wanted to live in Greece, and it seemed the right time.
And sorry, Charles.
At that time, there were very few foreigners actually coming out here to make a life of it. I speak the language. I know the culture very well. So for me, it was more of a case of coming home than moving away. And I'm in London every month for business still. So often enough for me to still enjoy what London has to offer. But I'm very much embedded in Crete.
Yeah, a short stint in London's just enough.
Yeah, I think 3-4 days does it for me.
You mentioned off you started getting into business at the age of 23.
I started buying property at the age of 23, 24. Um, I started in business at the age of 15. I had a company, a fully paid up company making billiard tables.
Wow.
My father was a cabinet maker. Um, he trained me, and it was at a time when the billiard or snooker craze had hit the television screens. And yeah, it was a long time ago. And I spent a few years making billiard tables,
Mm.
which meant designing them, um, which was at the same time and making them. They were all made by hand. I couldn't afford any machinery. Um, my school woodwork teachers were instrumental in helping.
Yep.
They were great guys, actually. I very happy memories of school in London, even though it was quite famous for non-academic achievement, shall we say.
Right.
But the teachers were great. Um, and yes, so um, I went to sixth form college where I did six A levels. The principal maths teacher for the country, Linda Bostock, I was in her last year, and all the textbooks, or most of the textbooks up and down the country, were written by herself, Linda Bostock, and her partner Chandler. And I so I started off doing civil engineering at Christ College, Cambridge. I left to do architecture at UCL. I ended up at Princeton in New Jersey in the States before coming back to UCL. And I started working as an architect principally on airports and towers.
You started off small then.
Well, there was actually a recession in the UK.
What, 2008?
And I was lucky enough to have been picked up to assist on the Stansted Airport design, which went on to the headquarters for the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank.
Mm-hmm.
And these were very interesting projects. And at no time in my what I will call a professional career have I viewed it as work. It's been a hobby all my life.
Yeah.
So yeah. At the age, as you say, of about early 20s, I really needed somewhere to live in London. The offices and college were central London. And yeah, we started dabbling in property. And that's something, again, which I've done all my professional life. And that has varied from the conversion of garages to multi apartment developments. At the moment, actually, I'm very busy working on a site over here, which actually was introduced to me by Ralph. And we're developing a five-star hotel, an eco hotel, quite local to where I live.
Right. Okay. Is that the one I've seen? The one that's partially built?
I don't know what you've seen.
I've seen one that's
This
partially.
was. It's a site in a village called Gokinohoryo,
Right.
the Red Village, which actually was the one of the locations for the shooting of the 1960 movie Zorba the Greek, which won a couple of Oscars, starring Anthony Quinn, Alan Bates, and actually an incredibly important novel by Xenakis, a Cretan, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in the 60s.
Right.
So a cultural milestone. The film actually was directed by Cypriot, Michael Kakayanis. And other than that, Gokino is known now for the variety of foreigners living there, actually.
Right. Okay, I can see you got some plans behind you there, a torrent of books as well. Are these the plans there, these schemes that you're working on at the moment, or?
Well, I'm talking to you from my office.
Yeah.
So there's drawings everywhere.
Okay, cool. On that note, we'll just go to our first break, and then what we'll do, we'll talk about what you know about Ralph and the story that you, by the sounds of it, you've lived it along with him, and know quite a lot about it. So would you like to introduce your first song?
I think my first song should be a song I've shared with Ralph. I introduced him to Mikis Theodorakis, who is a Cretan. He's probably the principal Greek composer of the 20th century. And the song is called Marina. It's a piece of poetry put to music by Theodorakis, who I actually had the privilege of meeting in Crete just before he died. And it's something I know Ralph will enjoy listening to as well as myself.
Okay, we're going to play that for you now.
πράσινο μου αστέρι, Μαρίνα φως του αυγερινού, Μαρίνα μαγριό περιστέρι και κρίνω του καλοκαιριού.
Dreamcatcher Radio is about capturing and creating dreams through music, chat, and debate. Empowering expression, enriching society. A go-to place for unsigned musical talent. A radio station which listens to its audience. Free speech, vibrant, engaging. Stream worldwide 24/7. Events, competitions, promotions. Always keen to have a listening ear. Contact us. hello@dreamcatcherradio.com.
Dreamcatcher Radio.
Okay, we are back. Now, let's talk about your relationship with Ralph first. How did it start? When did it start? To the best of your knowledge, because I know it's been quite a long relationship now.
I think it started around about 2007, when economically the country was milking the benefits of previous serial investments, which turned out to be rather shallow and short-lived. But I met Ralph, I think, in 2007, and my immediate impression was obviously he's a northerner, but he had a very real and convincing love of Crete. It turned out that he was quite enthusiastic chess player, and we've been playing chess ever since.
Mm-hmm.
It was very interesting to me that he was actually involved in property development and investment over here. Since I was also involved, I was also in my own capacity, but also advising other experienced developers, both Greek and English, at that time. Of course, the 2008 financial dilemma or breakdown concentrated minds, and many, in fact, almost all of the persons and companies investing and developing in Crete went to the wall. It was an incredibly difficult time in the UK as well. Most of my finances were still UK based, and these were difficult times.
It was extremely difficult.
Ralph approached me round about the end of 2008, beginning of 2009, and indicated that he would have liked me to assist in helping him pay back a debt of £1 million to a wealthy chap over in the UK that had invested in his Cretan projects. And I think this is an enduring and telling memory that will give everyone an insight into the legitimacy of Ralph as a businessman, and also something of his character. At the time, things were very tough, I think, especially for Ralph. But he still was very mindful of the debts he had assumed. Most of these debts were quite recent, and on the back of releasing profits to investors who would then reinvest with Ralph. So there was with most of his investors, there was a relationship there. And this chap that invested the million, I got to know was the CEO of a logistics company, whose name escapes me for the moment, based in the Cotswolds. He was quite wealthy, by all accounts. We're talking in the hundreds of millions. And my first sentiments were, Ralph, this guy is not going to miss his million, actually, most probably. And you are in a perilous financial situation. I think you should actually think a little more about number one than this chap in the Cotswolds. But he was quite insistent, and he actually paid me to introduce professional valuers from Athens to come over to the island, and I introduced a mechanism whereby people that owed Ralph money would actually hand over land, which in turn could be sold on to this chap from the Cotswolds, and at least 3/4 of the debt would be assuaged through this mechanism. I actually remember picking up this chap from Heraklion Airport. He was a little late. He flew in with his own private jet. That's the level of wealth we're talking about. And so he kept me waiting for an hour or so. And then he explained to me he had to refuel just in case in Athens. And I actually let him know there was something called EasyJet that would have got him to Heraklion probably on time for this side of 100 quid. But it was his hobby. Also, he was in his 80s. So an impressive chap, very old school. And I think it's a measure of the trust people had in Ralph that, frankly, the £1 million was the legal agreement run to a couple of A4 pages, which is unheard of.
I can imagine with Ralph.
But we're talking about a very intelligent chap, entirely old school, incredibly responsible professional job, his own company, and he was, as I say, 80 plus and still very active, and an incredibly active mind, a lot of agile mental dexterity. I attended lawyers' meetings with him, And even though most of the transaction was in Greek, he had no problem. He had done ancient Greek himself,
Right.
and would pick up on certain words. I acted as a semi-translator, and yes, I explained to him how, in fact, his company or himself could pick up this piece of land, and Ralph would have effectively gone some distance, in fact, paid back the lion's share of the debt. And so I arranged all of this. I got paid by Ralph, and everyone walked away from that happily.
Yeah.
And I did remind Ralph throughout, this is incredibly honourable, and I personally think that is, in my experience, it tells me what I need to know about the caliber of Ralph's character.
Mm. Can I ask a couple of questions? So
Yeah.
the guy invested £1 million or euros, doesn't matter. Was that before the recession?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, I'm guessing you had all the issues with asset values up there in Crete as well, yeah, because it pretty much affected the globe, didn't it?
Yes. Actually, property advancements, developments here were in their infancy, and the people that got in very early saw significant profits in a short space of time. But in fact, you'd recall that the Olympics in 2004 were held in Greece, and the Greek economy, on the back of a tirade of European investment, was in a very healthy way. But that was all stemmed by the 2008 financial debacle.
What did property values go down by? Roughly, it was 10, 20%, something like that, or more?
I think they halved. I think they literally halved.
So
It wasn't a
sorry,
it wasn't a mature property market. The people were coming out here mainly to retire. Locals weren't involved in the property market that I and Ralph were indulged ourselves. We were providing luxury retirement or holiday homes. The average Greek working man here actually belonged to a slightly different market, where the values were always quite low, actually up until quite recently. So having something, and many of them didn't have any debt. So the 2008 credit crunch meant very little to the average Greek, other than in fact, what happened a few years later with a change of government, it was found out that the national coffers were empty, that the level of corruption in successive Greek governments had really emptied the pot. Pension commitments to the middle classes, civil servants, were not being met. And that was the start of the huge undermining of the Greek economy, which lasted 15 years. And without me going into a polemic about Europe or the Germans, it had devastating effects through Greek society.
Mm. Yeah, I was just thinking out loud there. I mean, this is history anyway, but at that time, I was involved in property and construction as well, and it was horrific. Banks wouldn't trust anybody. Letter and credits were worthless. They would use any excuse under the sun to basically not lend any more money. They even go out and pay agents to undervalue the sites now, just so they can say that you're in negative equity. They're going to call on you. It was disgusting what was going on. I was just thinking about Ralph's situations. I got £1 million, and you said the property market went down 50%, and you want to withdraw some money out early. I would have only paid him a maximum of 50%. At maximum, I wouldn't even paid him that. But
Ralph didn't. Ralph didn't. I mean, I think the terms of the agreement that, regardless of what property did, I think his name was Peter Morris. That Ralph would be returning the capital as a very minimum consideration. But I kept saying to him, I mean, it was savage what actually happened in property, both in the UK and over here. And I said, of all the people, this is one of the last persons that would be affected by, losing £1 million.
yeah,
You're struggling. I would please have you think a little more about yourself than this multi-millionaire. But Ralph went to some expense and to make that happen, for him to, as best as he could, pay back the debt. Certainly over and above the efforts I think I would have gone to.
yeah, I think Mr. Morris come out very well there, actually. You said he ended up getting about 75% roughly of his money.
Well, it's a complicated story. He had a property manager. This was a very wealthy company, and they had property portfolios in the UK and emerging markets in Eastern Europe, Poland, I recall principally. And the manager of the property section took some. I think he was slightly offended. His advice was not to lend the money to Ralph, to his boss. And I think there were some issues with, as there always is in England, with class. He was very much upper middle class. Ralph, I don't think he liked the cut of Ralph's jib, to be honest.
Yeah.
And in any case, strongly advised against the lending of that consideration. And he constantly undermined the value of that land, actually, which I ended up owning, because this chap, the names escape me, I have to apologise. This chap convinced his boss that the land was worth half of the valuation that we had done in 2009. So just after the economic with the breakdown, and he constantly undermined Ralph's character and the wisdom of the loan being made in the first place against his advice. He's since retired, but the truth is, no matter what the true values were, we had a valuation of that land by Colliers International, a UK respected
Yeah, they're massive.
red book valuation. They had an office in Athens. I arranged for their valuer to have all the relevant information. He flew over. I drove him around to the site, to the registry offices, to lawyers, and we had a very good, again, analytical conversation about how, in fact, do you value a potential hotel site at a time of recession or depression, actually. But it got valued professionally at almost 750,000 euros, which I would say is the lion's share of the million euros. You're quite that was the debt.
Yeah. Okay, we need to go to the next break. Charles, would you like to introduce your next song?
The next song is a little known ditty by Dave Bowie from his Reality album, Bell Dog Bomb the Moon.
Okay, we're going to play that for you now. Okay, we are back. Something you mentioned about that valuers. Again, this is how skullduggerous and how people, I can say it on this radio station, Charles, were being shafted all over the place. The
Yeah.
So basically, the banks, because they needed the help of the valuers, they started blaming valuers for overvaluing sites, which is true in some instances. They were. Um, a lot of developers in the UK and probably elsewhere as well were doing fake pre-sales in order to get credit from the banks as well. So that was all used against them. So the banks started suing these agents. I know a massive one went down in the US as well as a big accountancy firm. And I think Anderson and Addison, no, I can't remember the name of it.
Consulting.
Was it? Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
And they were very large. But in the industry, it exposed such a massive problem. But the thing is, we're in a worse situation now anyway. With the property values, the house prices are ridiculous. Lending's difficult. It probably isn't so much for yourself because your financial clout now, but also your relationships with your lenders, and you manage to stick through it yourself. That very, very, very difficult time. I mean, I remember one of my companies was taking post-dated checks from developers that on paper are worth like 100 million. And he wanted to save his business and he managed to save it in the end. And just by playing the system, he had good lawyers and effectively, I think he started suing them and he was just making it up just to buy time. Because he had every faith that there's going to be recovery. And recovery did come very quickly as well, through quantitative easing and that sort of thing. It amazes me we're still doing that to date, actually.
I think that a lot of the skullduggery was US, UK based actually. In the UK, the property market probably has the UK economy attached to it, and successive governments have been. I mean, it would be suicidal in electoral terms for them for property values to diminish. So the level of assistance with mortgages or lending or artificially keeping property values buoyant in the UK is very rare, and it's politically motivated. I could talk a lot about this, but effectively, probably at the end of the boomer generation, we've effectively made it very difficult for young people starting off in life or as families to have the aspiration to own a home and have that security of mind. In fact, there are worse aspects of the artificiality of the UK market that comes into play. The system is sclerotic and is causing divisions throughout the UK in terms of geography, location, but also in terms of generations and relationships between parents and offspring. I think it's close to comical, personally. I'm old enough to remember when Thatcher actually decided, no, we're not going to have local authorities build council housing anymore.
Yeah,
It was,
I generally heard about these stories, and obviously about the poll tax riots and all that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah.
And it obviously did shock me. when I was hearing about Thatcher. But she had such a sort of divide in the country as well. I mean, interest rates were at like something like 9%, weren't they, or something? Um, and houses were in negative equity quite a lot. Um,
Uh, it was pretty much location um, sensitive. Um, Interest rates, I think, did get quite high. Um, Certainly, I still look at present interest rates and think people are very lucky
yeah,
these days.
I got that figure wrong. It was as high as 17%.
Yes, yes, it was
I've just,
it was crippling.
yeah,
Um, um, it I study these things, and the introduction of the Chicago School of Economics through Reaganism into the UK, I think will be the lasting legacy of Thatcher. I think I can appreciate what was necessary for her in terms of addressing union powers
mm,
um, um, in the very early 80s. I still remember the miners' strike, actually.
yeah.
I
I
was old
remember
enough.
the documentary on that. Yeah,
And but certainly she wasn't the panacea that the right make out in the UK that she actually was. Um, I think the lasting legacy of the Americanization, especially of UK society, is damning.
yeah. Well, when you have a shock to the system like that, it takes a long time to recover from. We talked about the fact that you went through this process and helped Ralph through this process to get this specific developer paid. I'm guessing there was other or investors, sorry, I should say. There were other investors which were still in the queue, so to speak. I imagine, or was he the only one?
No, there were. I was aware of the project he got involved with in the south of Crete, in a place called Plakias, somewhere um, very dear to me, actually. Um, and Ralph had bought a concrete frame of a middle-sized hotel that yeah was it was there was no road leading to the plot, and it was a very bumpy ride. Before a good while before we actually reached the plot, the first time he took me, I could actually tell that the concrete had actually suffered a virus. A rare thing, but effectively the structural integrity of what Ralph had bought was compromised. And I was aware that he'd bought it for about €1 million or so in a company with a number of investors, many of which had previously invested with Ralph.
Mhm.
And he was looking for a solution to the situation. And this was in the middle of, as I say, a deep depression in the Greek economy, which lasted 15 years.
Yeah, this is actually the
Um,
site that I saw as Plackers Palace, isn't it?
yes,
That's the
yeah,
one I saw. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, that was sold to him by an accountant that lives up this way. And I think that it would have been incredibly difficult for um, the proper due diligence to have been afforded that type of situation. Very few people would have known, for example, visually, that this concrete frame was compromised.
Mhm.
But in any case, had it have been a pristine concrete frame, at that time, there was no value to the construction that had been affected or to the land itself. In fact, it was certainly negative. It would have had negative value. Just building a road up to the site would have been, in the order of about 60, 70,000 euros.
Mhm.
That was in the heyday when Ralph actually acquired the site. It was a tangible asset, and in fact would have been a very wise buy in that location. And had Ralph's business or recording of his business actions and procedures been perfect, it still wouldn't have made any difference. Not only that site, but there are many sites like that all over Greece that at that time were worth less than zero.
Mhm. Yeah. So Mr. Accountant did very well by the sounds of it. The
I was helping a few local, quite wealthy property development companies here
yeah.
in the northern part of the island, which had pristine business practices and total respect for the legality of situations, but they went bust, and they went bust more or less overnight, so quickly that the saving of assets or stripping of assets wasn't possible. So Ralph wasn't in a vacuum. The whole property sector and construction sector of Crete and Greece, a country of 10 million people, was laid to ruin inside of a couple of weeks.
Yeah. In the UK, I'm sure it's no different to where you are in Crete. Is that when we're doing a GDV, gross valuation on the site, we have a very, very simple way of measuring cost for hotels, for example. I mean, for housing, residential housing, you do cost per square foot or meter on the build costs. And for example, I'm going back a long time now, to build a hotel, depending on the size of the site, so let's just say 150 rooms, the figure used to be about 35,000 per room, which included common parts. So we're basically doing 150 times £35,000. That include like car parking, all that sort of stuff, right? And that's how they used to do it. And they used to do the valuation of how much income per room, and that's how they started their due diligence. Would you say Ralph did something similar there, or not really?
I wasn't involved in the due diligence. Actually, I was brought in as a troubleshooter late in the day. But one thing I would say is I'm involved in the valuation of hotels,
Yeah.
and it quite simply isn't as simple as a residential situation valuation, and it is dependent, the values, accurate valuations, on any number of moving variants. Principally, you would have to have regard whether it was a resort or a town centre hotel. Would there be a winter market? What star criteria? location, of course, just how much the profitability would depend on associated revenue streams such as restaurants, bars, gyms, etc. Yeah, it's actually the valuation of hotels is a specialism.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, hoteliers, they have
Yeah,
to go to specialist agents
yeah,
in order to get a report done, which is on the local community as well. How many hotels are in the area? Blah blah blah. Um, but what I was saying was, whenever I've been in meetings, they would use this basic cost before they even pick up, a drawing or anything. They'll have in their mind, what the site is, but they'll go to those two basic numbers. What's
yes.
got?
There has to be some rule of thumb
Yeah.
for people to get their head around what am I paying? Is it good value?
Mm.
And actually, that's a notion I disagree with very strongly.
Mhm.
Property is incredibly individualistic, and many people have come a cropper making these broad assumptions.
Yeah.
It really, at the time we're talking about, the top valuers in Europe, if not the world, oddly enough, were called Christie's, based in Victoria, London, and the resort specialist they had was a Danish chap. Can't remember his name. Lovely guy, and I had him visit Greece a few times on things we were looking at, and the complexity and often contradictions of how you actually value something as multifaceted as a modern resort hotel is actually, to me, is very interesting. But it doesn't take a lot to actually undervalue or overvalue what is actually quite a complicated calculation.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to the next experience before we go on to. So, Placas Palace clearly has been stayed on hold ever since. Um, and there was just basically superstructures there. That's it. But it was very messy there though. Very messy concrete work.
It Plaques Palace was one of very many, I would say thousands of situations um, in Crete, Greece generally, where extremely valuable pieces of land almost overnight or had a negative value. You couldn't sell these things. They were an embarrassment to the lenders that had lent in the first place. And you had this climate of what we call red loans all over Greece. One certainly one of the things the banks couldn't do was to have blanket sales of properties, which in itself would then depress the market further.
Mm.
Um, but were selected morsels of land that were being put up for sale. And Placius Palace was one of these. And that would have been because it would have been obvious to the market that there was a deal there. The the run by mill type developments weren't put up for auction. The banks didn't move on those because there would be clear losses to the banks. So the fact that Placius Palace actually was put into the equivalent of Greek receivership and put to auction represented the fact that actually it did offer a good prospect and good value, and would likely find a buyer that would clear the bank debt. I had the whilst Ralph was actually in prison here in Hanya, I got a phone call. I can't recall whether it was Ralph or his lawyer, to say, can you get over to the courts in Refino, about 30 kilometers from where I live, and stop the sale at auction of Plakias Palace. I had half an hour to get there. I made it. I actually got stopped by the cops. I don't think. Yes, I got a speeding ticket, but I got there, and I provided just reason and cause why such a sale of Plakias Palace would be illegitimate and bad commerce. The reasons you could actually stop a sale here in Greece are very few. But I managed that. And again, it was very, very late very late in the day, that anyone was given notice that such a potential sale would happen. And a reflection of how conscious Ralph was to keep the asset within the company.
That's for Ron, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what other experiences have you had with Ralph in terms of before going to prison, and then we'll talk about the prison stuff and your thoughts and feelings around all that.
Again, I would say that we had a relationship as friends.
Yeah.
That eventually meant I would actually assist him with various more tricky aspects of his business dealings, especially in the case of Greek law and Greek business practices. I, from the onset, was very impressed about the fact that he'd chosen to live in Crete, not just engage in business, but for example, he was actually quite loved, very much respected by the local Cretans. He got into the local music, the cuisine. He was a family man. Crete's a great place to bring up a family, and as far as he was concerned, he was enacting business practices as the Greeks themselves went about doing so. The truth is, the average Greek actually was behind the times. Greek taxation laws, the registration of land, the representations to honor ownership and land taxes, and these were all being introduced. In fact, the registry system here in Greece is not that sophisticated even now, and the government is playing a catch-up situation to bring the land registrations into the 21st century and up to a European model, certainly. Yeah, very often I'd be giving advice to Ralph, and he was an avid listener. He was very concerned that, in fact, he'd stay on just the right side of the legal system, which is common practice, not only in property, but I would suggest throughout not only Greek business practice, but the world, certainly the UK. Very much it was actually advising as a friend and close associate.
So he would listen to you then?
He would listen.
Yeah.
It wouldn't necessarily mean he would action my advice, but he certainly would listen. Still does.
And you felt he took it seriously, though? Everything. The fact
He
that
certainly took it.
I'll word it another way. The fact that he's custodian for investors' money, did he take that seriously?
Yes. Yeah, it was the lifeblood of his business. So on many levels, he took it incredibly seriously. Not just for the fact that it was actually enabling him to make acquisitions and realize the potential of his business insight, but moreover, he had he felt genuine gratitude and responsibility to the investors, many of whom were serial investors. They weren't doing just one or two investment deals with Ralph. They actually, a lot of these people knew him for many years.
Yeah.
Certainly trusted him. I think that was the real crux, and it was actually a struggle for most people, including myself, to actually, especially at a time when UK property values were rising healthily, to have someone actually say, yes, I'm going to make an investment in this island a few thousand miles from where I live, or in a legal system I don't really understand. But something? Ralph's involved. We trust him. And he found money. He came by money a lot easier than most of us.
Yeah. Because I understand it's mainly his friendship group from his previous businesses there in the UK.
I think certainly they were a jolly bunch.
Yeah.
I think many of them had visited the island before making the investments, and they came, they saw. A good few of them would ask me quite informed questions about the veracity of the market, of the particular projects Ralph was presenting. I wasn't involved with Ralph or associated with him, so I was happy to give independent advice. But the level of sophistication of investor was mature and relatively high.
So almost a sophisticated investor.
Yes. I think also that the investors were of a certain age where they had done very well out of property in the UK. And the returns Ralph was speaking about, because it was a very early stage in the maturing of the Crete market, was at least double that you may expect in the UK. So they were attractive propositions.
And I guess
and realistic.
Yes, some of the people actually moved there and bought property there for themselves, didn't they, as well?
Yeah, well, it's a nice place to come and live. UK was still in the EU.
Yeah.
there's yeah, well, obviously, uh, I'm probably here for different reasons than many of these people.
Mhm.
But they they will have seen just how comfortable uh, a life it is here
Yeah. Okay,
at
we've
a
only got.
time. Yeah.
How much time have you got? Because we haven't got onto prison stuff yet. How much more time have you got?
I'm just saying, I've got a low battery, so let's get on to what do you want to
Okay, I
speak
just want to
on.
ask you before that though.
Yeah.
Is black money? What does that mean?
Black money. Um, the economy in Greece um, was pretty much cash based. The reason for that, the reasons for that are actually several. The main reason was Greece was an occupied country by the Ottoman Empire, well, Crete actually for 400 years. So you hid assets. So you had dealings, well, in currencies that would obfuscate the true value of the transaction. Um, so it was a cash-based society, and property deals, and this was something which was very difficult to explain to Northern Europeans. Um, but your own lawyer, your own solicitor, you'd agree to buy a property for 100,000, let's say. The number that was actually made explicit in the contracts would have been about 50,000,
Mhm.
and you'd make up the rest in cash.
Yeah.
The transfer taxes would therefore be rather less. Now, there's all sorts of ways you do the same kind of thing. Yes, so the practice of a black economy was commonplace and rife throughout Greece, and nobody batted an eyelid. This was standard practice. Um, it's still going on to a large degree. Um, there are checks and measures in place now which make it more difficult, but certainly nothing as draconian as the anti-money laundering regulations in the UK, for example.
Mhm.
But there has been a shift in mentality and practices. But at the time we're talking about, um, Ralph wasn't singular in following black economy practices. It was the whole of the country.
Yeah, yeah. As I understand, in terms of money laundering, the UK is one of the worst countries in the world for money laundering, even today. The
Well, you need to be a little more sophisticated
Mhm.
about it. But I do remember Russians just simply double parking in Hampstead High Street, walking into estate agents with attaché cases full of cash
Yeah.
and wanting a deal.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's. I've. Like I say, we're at this episode now. So I've learned a lot through this series, and we've been covering a lot of the paperwork that's available to Ralph. And he's been quite surprised by what we've read out himself. He's quite shocked. And he feels the impression I get, he feels upset that he didn't know about some of this stuff in terms of what was actually going on. Now, let's talk about. So I just want to say one thing. So he managed to. I mean, one thing with Ralph, he is a salesman, that's for sure. And as you said, he's got a good network of people that he knows, they trust him, and managed to get them over the line in terms of investments. And like you said, multiple investments. So they exit at one stage, and they don't always have to come back in, do they? But they want to come back in for more. So let's talk about the demise and what you know, and we'll try and finish on this segment with it. How it started going south. I know the story that I've read out and listened to Ralph on air. What can you put your two pennies worth in?
Well, the death knell for the property aspect of things was very much the same as all the other development and construction companies that were in a very healthy state. The body blow to the Greek economy was no simple recession. We're talking about a country mired in deep depression. So regardless of whatever business practices any company was conducting, they went bust. Ralph's business went bust.
So what you're basically saying was the depression, as you call it, didn't discriminate against anybody.
Oh, everyone. One of the companies I was advising, they had accountants checking on accountants, lawyers check. They were about to go public, so they were whiter than Caesar's wife, should we say?
Mm-hmm.
They went bust. Okay, there was no market. In fact, the lending criteria by foreign banks as well as Greek banks, it was catastrophic. I was lucky enough personally that I didn't actually borrow money. I had capital, but without that source of bank lending, even the bits of land I had, even though I didn't owe money to anyone, I mean, basically they stood there for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't borrow that 5 million, that 3 million to make that deal happen. Or that, you couldn't go into partnerships, joint ventures. The whole system went into sclerosis. Literally, bank managers, you'd walk into their offices, their feet were on the table and they were messing about on their iPhones. No business was being conducted. So regardless, Ralph's property interests would have come to zero. I think the saddest and the most relevant issue with the Ralph saga, if you want to call it that, is how his own family, in fact, his brother and his eldest son, contrived between them to put Ralph into prison with very little regard for his well-being, the status of family. I find that if it was a Hollywood script, you wouldn't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And Ralph lived through this. He served serious time in prison, both here in Hanya and in the UK. I visited him both here and in the UK, and he put up a very brave face, but there is no doubt that it would have had, and maybe still has, damning psychological effects on someone's character. That to me is the saddest aspect of the whole story.
Right. The And my understanding is he's now back fighting strong in some respects. Is that correct?
He he's an ebullient character. Um, he's an optimist, um, certainly a half glass full man, and yeah, he enjoys business, um, and I'm very happy to say that he's making a good fist of things.
Yeah. Do you know a lady called Susan Watt and Simon and Stephen Thomas? Do you know them?
I never met Susan Watt. I met the Thomases briefly.
Mm,
Um, I've seen a lot of correspondence and documentation with Susan Watt's name
yeah.
on, acting on behalf of Ralph's company. Um, and yeah, I don't have first-hand knowledge of her.
No. Okay. So, did you go to the Greek trial?
Yes,
Yeah.
I
How did you?
was I was at the Greek trial. Um, so were his older brothers, and so was his slightly younger brother, Cedric, who I sat next to in the courtroom. In fact, I was accosted by Cedric. He actually stopped me entering the courtroom. I'd just given one of my employees a lift to the airport, and I was a few minutes late into the court was already in process. And Cedric stopped me entering the courtroom to tell me just what a rotten, lying, thieving scoundrel his brother was.
Really?
Yes,
I thought that at that time the he was supporting Ralph.
I I don't think he was. I think certainly his other brothers were, and it was very heartening to see. Um, I got the impression from the first time I met Cedric with Ralph that there was animosity between the brothers.
Mm. Just Cedric, is
Um,
it? Or just Cedric, or all of them?
Cedric towards Ralph.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I think they're different characters. I um, I have a brother as well, so I thought actually at first it was no more than your average sibling
Mm.
rivalry or friction.
That's pretty harsh
Um,
words, though, isn't it? It's pretty harsh words.
but I was actually physically stopped by Cedric from going into the courtroom before he had to tell me who his brother actually was.
Mm.
Um, that was that caught me off balanced. Actually, it's coming back to me now. Um, on one level, it's comical,
Mm.
but this was actually Ralph had just been he'd just done time in what I would consider to be a pretty unpleasant prison. 9 months in Greece. Um, I personally was appalled at the company he would have to keep in that prison. Um, it's I genuinely felt for him, um, and I could recognize just how pivotal this court hearing would be for Ralph. In fact, for anyone that regarded Ralph as family or friends, or a friend. Clearly, Cedric had an agenda. Um, the process in court was rather one-sided. The um, prosecuting lawyer was his clients hadn't turned up. and there wasn't an awful lot of evidence on his part to present to court, in actual fact. And there were friends of Ralph that attended court. Jeff Brown, in particular, I would have to say, who gave a very coherent and convincing riposte against accusations regarding Ralph's character, especially. I gave evidence in some small part. His legal advisor, Ralph's legal advisor, was excellent because the situation are very complicated. They're complicated in any fraud type scenario. In fact, it throws up all sorts of questions as to how a jury trial can possibly give fair hearing to such complex financial undertakings not just in Greece, but regardless. Just the Ralph situation was very complicated. Ralph's lawyer, unlike the prosecuting lawyer, had taken the trouble at some great expense to Ralph's family, I may add, to understand the underlying financial implications and situations, and could negate the prosecution accusations very comprehensively. That, together with the character witnesses that was brought to bear on the three judges sitting the trial, I think led to Ralph being freed, to the almost universal joy of family and friends, apart from his brother Cedric, who I took some time to have regard to how he was spitting feathers. His brothers, their wives, were joyous, and he had, he couldn't get out of the courtroom quickly enough. He turned a different color. He turned grey.
Is that do you reckon because he needed to go and make some phone calls?
I don't think so. I think he. I actually spoke to him on my way out. I mean, I got out relatively quickly because it was it was a family moment with his older brothers, their wives, and it had been. I had been there all day, effectively, and he stopped me as he stopped me going in. He stopped me leaving to tell me that Ralph was a serial gambler that had cost him tens of thousands of pounds. It was important to him to have the last say in the matter.
I mean, what I will say about that, though, if he's a serial gambler, doesn't necessarily make him a fraudster. It's a totally different issue. But
I have nothing. I don't think Ralph is a serial gambler, or ever has been. I've known him long enough to know that I would have been aware. I'm a gambler. I gamble. And one thing I do know about gamblers is they talk about gambling. They need to talk about it. Ralph never spoke to me ever about gambling.
I can't imagine there being many casinos near you either, is there? Do you have casinos?
There are, I mean, it's more. I don't know. I don't know what they were on about. I know that a lot of the other Greek developers locally, they were, they had serious gambling problems,
Mhm.
and that sometimes Ralph would put on bets for them in a UK format where the odds were better also. Actually, it bores me to death,
Right.
this stuff. But Ralph would do favors. But I had a conversation with his British barrister when in regard to whether or not I would be a suitable um, character witness for Ralph at Bradford. And they brought up the gambling thing, and they said to, I mean, I have to say at this stage, my father was a professional gambler.
Mhm.
He had a big win in 1968. That's how he bought the house in London. And then he gave up, just like that. You know,
Wow. Very good.
Cypriots are gamblers. It's in our blood. I mean, um, so it's I know families that have lost a lot of money,
Mm.
whole inheritances. That's pretty sad. But the barristers asked me whether I knew that Ralph had waged over £1 million gambling. I said no, I had no knowledge. I asked them how much did he lose of the million, and they said 40,000. And I said to them, well, 40,000 out of a million, excuse me, that's not gambling. That's a hobby.
Mhm.
I spend more on my hobbies. I mean, over so many years, 40,000, you know, that's not gambling. That's not, why would that? And also, gambling isn't illegal.
No.
Where,
Mhm.
where are we going with this thing? Obviously, um, there had been overtures made that Ralph was siphoning off investors' money to indulge in illicit practices.
Mhm.
Um, I can't say much more on that. They didn't use me as a character witness in the UK, by the way.
Yeah. Ralph told me. Yeah. They hardly use any of us as witnesses.
Well, I was actually doing business in Bradford as things happen, in the north of England, in Buttershaw, Bradford, Todmorden near Halifax. So I used to actually see Ralph in the evenings during the course of the trial.
Mm.
And I would be staying in hotels in Bradford, and we would have a drink, have the odd game of chess, and I'd ask him how the trial was going. Um, the I hadn't been made terribly aware of the substance of the trial in the UK, and I thought it would pretty much follow along the lines of the trial in Greece.
Mm.
Um, I think Ralph had that conviction, excuse the pun, as well.
Mhm.
And I think I was with him the evening before um, the verdict came in. And he was, again, very ebullient, confident, and pretty certain he was going to walk away from the Crown Court a free man, and that it all would have been a waste of time. Um, and well, that didn't happen. To my surprise, again, I wasn't conversant with the exact ins and outs of that trial. But the feedback I was getting from Ralph certainly thought there was no case.
Yeah.
And I found out through a friend of mine that had actually seen the verdict. I think it was actually on BBC Yorkshire or something. and it was a friend of mine that knew Ralph. That he knew Ralph through me. Um, he told me your friend's just got 7 years. That was the first I heard of Ralph being put down in the UK.
Yeah. They go back to
Uh,
Cedric. The reason why I asked about it, because obviously what's transpired from the Bradford case is that that he was working for the police whilst Cedric was in Crete, and basically the police obviously had an appetite to retry this case, which sorry, yeah, there was police, yeah, the retry this case in the UK. The laws, I mean, your laws are quite old in some respects, where basically, you know, there's a presumption in my understanding from your laws that you're somewhat guilty. So in order to protect the public, they're going to remand you quite quickly. That's my understanding. And in the UK, you're supposed to have the presumption of innocence. Now, one thing I will say about that, and you touched on it just now, is the fact jury trials in financial fraud cases, they shouldn't happen in the UK. They shouldn't.
no,
The
no,
Because it's baffling to understand, and especially when you've got so much movement of cash, and you know you explain about how the history of how the Greek financial system worked and all that sort of stuff. I don't know if that was discussed or not. Um, Ralph had to explain it to me in a few episodes, basically, because I'd think about it again, sleep on it, and the following week I'd be asking more questions about it. Um, he did talk about gambling for other people as well. He did mention it in one of the episodes, um, but that was pretty much it, really. Um, and to exchange money and stuff like that. Um, Again, I didn't really understand that bit, but what you're saying is you get better margins by gambling the same bet in the UK.
yeah. People approach me. They still approach me here,
Mm,
um, and I say to them, "No, I won't do it for you." Basically, because it's way too boring, time consuming. Ralph is one of these nice guys that would just go out of his way, you know, to help some of these guys. No, but yeah, it's there's a big appetite for gambling here, probably less so than in Cyprus, actually. But and I will, I bet on sports,
yeah,
uh, and I normally do quite well. Um, and very often I don't have the time to make a bet.
yeah.
And it's a luxury
But like you
thing.
say, it's a hobby type thing as well. The
Yeah.
Okay. How would you like? I'm just going to give you the floor now. How would you like to end up this episode? For anything you'd like the listeners to hear. I mean, you've been very complimentary of Ralph throughout this, um, and you've also explained briefly about you do business different to the way Ralph does business, where yours is more analytical based, where Ralph probably takes a mindset view of it and does a little less due diligence than you would. However, as we said, everybody fell victim of the economy. The only caveat I will say to that is that this Susan Watt and Thomas's played a big part in basically Ralph ended up in this situation in the first place. Um,
I
a lot,
can't comment much on what or the Thomases.
yeah,
I know the Thomases. Well, I don't know, but I can work out they were in their own way looking to sideline their money, a sizable chunk of their money, to evade divorce settlements and taxes.
yeah,
Um, and Ralph accepted, uh, as 99% of business men would do. It's it's not it's not unheard of. Um, No, the only thing I really want to say is that Ralph has been the sorry subject of the vitriol and connivance of his brother, and really, unfortunately, for any father, I can't imagine it happening. I mean, it's beyond my comprehension that your eldest son or any series of son would contrive with their uncle. I mean, this is the stuff of medieval
Mm.
uh, royal lineage character assassin. I mean, how did that? How can that possibly happen?
I can
You know,
understand Cedric, yeah, because he's had
yeah.
his issues with the police, but I don't understand the son why a son would do that. I don't get it. How would he benefit?
Um, Cedric had, as I say, an agenda, and he offered Ralph's son, Declan, seed capital for a business. Um, by all accounts, the business is doing very well. By all accounts, it was a business that was still functioning, and it was a business Ralph had left his son,
Yeah.
but obviously needed some capital investment. Cedric offered that investment for, shall we say, a more rounded picture of Ralph's financial dealings in Crete. Now, Cedric would turn up at my house uninvited. Not that you need an invite, but he would start taping our conversations. They would always be relating to Cedric, to Ralph, sorry, and they would start off pretty friendly, typical UK copper fashion,
Mm.
and then get to the meat of the matter, where I would go and switch off his phone, or I will drop her a glass of wine over his phone. Uh, at times, he was accompanied by Declan. At other times, he was accompanied by someone I didn't know, British chap. Um, but the questions were pointed. They weren't questions I actually had any knowledge of. He was scrambling for any piece of dirt, um, and it was embarrassing. And now that you said, Ralph has told me he was actually acting for British police forces, that could be the only explanation in a professional capacity,
Mm.
which I would suggest is which police force in the world would view that as qualitative investigation.
I don't think
You
it's
know,
even admissible because you can't
I
record.
would
It,
think not.
I mean,
I
the
mean, I'm not
law.
allowed to make a planning application should I actually have a relation in the borough council, whether or not they're working in the planning department or otherwise.
Mm.
So, it was a nonsense. But when you start to measure and start adding up all the little details of why should have that happened, that led on to, uh, the the the, the corruption is convincing.
Mm.
I'm not a conspiracy theory kind of guy, and I think Ralph, as we all do, we make mistakes in business. But how many of us have been the subject of that type of vitriolic persecution, especially from your own family, your own son? I that is the stuff of Greek tragedy. That I haven't heard of any that that. I try and explain this very rarely, because I don't think anyone would believe me.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is, like I say, it's an extraordinary situation to be in, and it's got to be so disheartening. And like you said, Raoul's probably masking a lot of demons in his mind, which is only natural. On that note, thank you very, very much for your time, Charles. Really, really appreciate it. Charles, have you got a final song, or do you want, or not?
I've been listening to Sugar Cane by Sonic Youth.
Yeah.
I drove from London to Crete a couple of weeks ago, and that was my go-to song first thing in the morning as I got in the car, made my way down the motorway. And it reminded me, I was quite friendly with quite a famous band, and they let me have the tape of this before it was released, a good 6 months before it was released. So I got special regard for the song, so I'm still playing it. So
Okay, we're going to play that for you now. A short 18-minute video on the history of Greece.
We might think we already know everything about ancient Greece. The Parthenon, the 300 Spartans, and blind Homer's Iliad and Odyssey are familiar to all. Yet there were far more than 300 Spartans. The Parthenon was actually built as a kind of central bank, and no such unified state as ancient Greece with Athens as its capital ever existed. The Trojan War was as distant in time to Alexander the Great as the Vikings are to ourselves. So let's try to get our heads around ancient Greece, and hopefully a little quicker than in 2,000 years. "3,716 years ago, the pyramids of Egypt were already standing, and Babylon was the world's first megapolis, home to a prototype of the Tower of Babel. On Crete, however, a mysterious civilization was flourishing. It had 3-storied palaces, and all this with no defenses. The Cretans apparently led a relatively peaceful life, admiring flowers, blue monkeys, and beautiful women, walked around topless, while the men preferred loincloths or skirts. The Cretans had a navy and their own writing system, and nobody has yet succeeded in deciphering them. Until one day, on the island of Thera, the modern-day wedding paradise of Santorini, all this ended in the greatest volcanic eruption in European history. Part of Thera sank beneath the waves, presumably giving rise to the myth of Atlantis. Tsunamis 100 meters high and vast ash clouds stretching for thousands of miles around. Crete never recovered from this eruption, and invaders soon swarmed in. The once peaceful island then filled with bronze weapons and tablets written in a new, strange language, which turned out to be the earliest known form of Greek, spoken by warlike tribes, which had settled the nearby Greek mainland, building such cities as Thebes, Athens, Mycenae, and Pylos. But these cities already sheltered behind 6-meter walls. Life here was not peaceful at all. A few centuries later, the Greeks themselves explained them with legends of cyclopean builders and were no longer aware that any other civilization had come before them on Crete. By this logic, even the half-bull Minotaur was half Greek. Nobody batted an eyelid at the fact that games with bulls were a purely Cretan form of entertainment. Greeks appropriated everything they met on their way with great virtuosity. In conquering Crete, they had conquered the seas. Marine trade saw them grow even richer. Almost all the inscriptions found among the heaps of gold in the tombs of Mycenae are financial accounts. Mycenae took the lead in the fight against Troy in Homer's Iliad. As recently as 150 years ago, this story was considered a fairy tale, until a millionaire and amateur archaeologist, Heinrich Schliemann, excavated Mycenae, and Troy, a replica of the legendary Trojan horse, now stands here. Archaeologists have indeed found traces of fire and destructions at Troy, but this was accompanied by the decline of virtually all regional settlements. Unceasing attacks by barbarian tribes turned the whole Mediterranean into a war zone. The next 400 years were a dark age. Literacy fell into oblivion, leaving us with nothing to read about the events then taking place. Fortunately, what we do have is Homer. Everybody has heard about the blind poet, the author of the Iliad and the Odyssey. In actual fact, we don't know what Homer looked like, or when he lived, whether he was one man or many. But even though the Iliad and Odyssey were written down after the Dark Ages, the daily routines of its characters take us right back to this time. Odysseus, for instance, was only king by virtue of his larger flocks of pigs and goats. His father slept on the ground in ashes with his slaves. Homer's characters were illiterate and used heads of cattle in place of money, a far cry from Crete and Mycenae with their three-storied palaces. What had happened? The Mycenaean civilization was destroyed by the Dorians, who, though Greek, were totally savage. The earlier population either hid in the mountains or fled to the east. Of all the achievements of the previous civilization, the Dorians left only the essentials, the sailing ship and the potter's wheel. It took a further 4 centuries for them to start adding the most primitive depictions of animals and people. At around the same time, the turn of the 9th and 8th centuries BC, the Greeks in Ionia borrowed a completely new alphabet from their Phoenician neighbors. This bore little resemblance to the linear writing styles of Crete and Mycenae. Do you recognize the modern Greek letters? The fog of Dark Ages had started to clear. Only here do we begin to recognize ancient Greece, the country that never actually existed. This was no state with an established border or capital, but rather a multitude of distinct and completely independent cities, polises. How did this come about? Greece is a land divided by sea and mountains into separate little parts, of which only a handful was suitable for agriculture. Even grain had to be imported. But why not grow it yourself, over there, across the sea? Thus, the great colonization began. If the first historians are to be believed, Miletus alone founded 90 colonies. The heel of the Italian boot was colonized too, followed by the alphabet that would form the basis for Latin and take over the world. Greek civilization spread from the modern-day Rostov-on-Don to Marseille, laying the foundations of the French wine industry. Fragments of amphorae scattered from Gibraltar to Georgia. These were containers for grain and wine. The latter was diluted with water in proportions of 1 to 3. Only barbarians would drink it neat. For trading purposes, coins appeared. Like the alphabet, these too were borrowed from their neighbors. According to Plato, a few centuries saw the Greeks settled around the Mediterranean like frogs around a pond. And yet, 2 cities, Athens and Sparta, almost did not participate in colonization. The Spartans descended from the warlike Dorians that had destroyed the Mycenaean civilization. They solved the land issue by conquering their neighbors in the broad, fertile region of Messenia. The locals were declared helots, something midway between slaves and serfs, and greatly outnumbered the Spartans proper. Sparta transformed from an ordinary polis into a military camp, whose main task was the prevention of any uprising. Things were quite different in Athens. Land hunger there had forced the aristocracy and the people to come to terms, and from this, democracy was born. But first, the tyrants took power. A Greek tyrant did not necessarily terrorize people, rather the opposite. Typically, he was an aristocrat who had quarreled with his peers, holding out promises of a better life. He used the common people's support to seize power by force. From then on, all his energies were focused on retaining power. The tyrant therefore made no reforms and simply drove any rival aristocrats from the polis. To divert the attention of the populace, tyrants introduced and fostered new festivals and cults. The dissatisfied could perish in the brazen bull. But you can't roast everyone. The tyrants were overthrown, and the suppressed aristocracy attempted to negotiate with the people, giving birth to Greek democracy. If an ancient Greek were to see modern democracy, he would just say one word: oligarchy. Ancient democracy was direct, with no representatives. If a polis had 6,000 citizens, they could all freely participate in the assembly. Admittedly, the number of citizens was less than a quarter of all residents, excluding slaves, women, and the migrant workers called metics. By the middle of the 6th century, the Ionian cities were most advanced, eclipsing Athens and Sparta. They were the first to master such Eastern innovations as the alphabet, coinage, mathematics, naval fleets, and complex trade logistics. Meanwhile, a sudden threat appeared to their rear: the vast Persian Empire. Miletus still hoped to preserve its independence, and with Athenian aid attempted to resist. Unfortunately, this was in vain, and the Persians torched the city and pressed on. Their attempts to subdue Greece lasted 20 years. We owe our knowledge of this to the first historian, Herodotus. According to his account, as many Greeks fought for the Persians as supported Athens and Sparta. How did they win? The first reason was military innovation. At the Battle of Marathon, the Greeks used the phalanx, a body of troops fighting in close formation. The Persians allegedly lost 6,400 men, and the Athenians a mere 192, plus the messenger who ran the 42,192 meters to Athens to announce the victory, after which he dropped dead. The second reason was already becoming a meme. At the narrow coastal pass of Thermopylae, King Leonidas led the 300 Spartans, who held back hundreds and thousands of Persians for 3 days. Sure, a few thousand Greeks from other cities and their Helot subjects were a big help, yet the Spartan spirit was key. Not for nothing did they live in barracks, even during times of peace. And the third reason was the fleet. Several years prior to the invasion, silver deposits had been found near Athens. This windfall might have been spent on anything, but it was decided to put it towards the construction of 200 triremes, fast and maneuverable warships with 3 rows of oars. Thanks to this new naval force, the Greeks broke the Persians in a decisive naval battle. A counter-offensive began. The Greeks of Sicily defeated their old rival, Carthage. A scattered array of policies thus defended the territory in which classical Greek culture was born. To permanently defeat Persia and liberate the cities in Asia, Athens founded a maritime union. Finally, Athens had become the center of the Greek world. 150 cities agreed to make annual payments for the maintenance of a common army and navy. The treasure was kept on Delos, the sacred island of Apollo. Shortly afterwards, however, patronage was passed to Athene, motivated by greater fiscal reliability, of course. Little imagination is required to suppose which polis was chosen for her headquarters. The most elite real estate in the 5th century BC was the Parthenon. It was constructed not so much as a temple, but as a kind of central bank, housing all the allied treasury. Without these funds, the Greek classics wouldn't have existed at all. No sculpture, drama, philosophy. The strategist and orator Pericles became the head of this new financial center. He concluded a 30 years peace with Sparta, restored the Acropolis that had been sacked by the Persians, and extended fortress walls to the city harbor. This was rebuilt to a grid layout, a forerunner to New York. While the sculptor Phidias was immortalizing Greece in stone, the philosopher Anaxagoras expressed an outrageous idea that the sun was not the god Hellas, but a burning body equal in size to Peloponnese. A whole great culture was created in half a century. Sparta and its allies grew jealous of Athens' prosperity. A Cold War had smoldered between them ever since the victory over the Persians, and things warmed up in 431 BC. The Spartans and their allies besieged impregnable Athens. Its inhabitants took cover behind the walls. The grain supply from Africa was cut off, and those shipments that made it through brought either typhus or the plague. Even Pericles himself perished. He was replaced by demagogues. Whoever promised the most was elected strategist. So Alcibiades, the unscrupulous nephew of Pericles, became the head of the Athenian armed forces. He proposed a short but victorious war. Let's pack it all in and sail for Sicily, as if the altercations with Sparta weren't enough. The fleet was ready, But something inexplicable happened the night before the voyage. All around the city, someone smashed off the most prominent parts of the Hermes statues. Alcibiades was accused of provocation, but he fled to Sparta to beg political asylum. The chief strategist then proceeded to advise the enemy. The allies began to drop out one by one. Athens agreed to a humiliating peace with the condition of demolishing its defensive walls. They had targeted Hermes, and the might of Athens was crushed. On the bright side, this was the heyday for Greek tragedy and comedy. Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, the three great tragedians, and the comedic playwright Aristophanes created plays that are still relevant today. And yet they penned them in the full confidence that the first production would be the last, as was the way in theatre at the time. Classical drama was always about current events, and while things may have been getting worse in the city, culture flourished. There was no winner in the Peloponnesian War. All Greek cities fell into decline. On the other hand, unexpected surprises would come from the Macedonians, distant relatives of the Greeks who had always been regarded as semi-barbarians. And then even the great philosopher Aristotle went to work in Macedonia as tutor to an extremely talented boy. The boy's father was Philip II. It was he who built up the Macedonian kingdom, defeating a Greek coalition. He almost managed to unite Greece in order to fight the Persians. But Philip was killed, and his son, known to us as Alexander the Great, blazed his way through Asia, broke the army of the Persian king Darius, but still refused to turn back, reaching India. Thus, a new world was born, the Hellenistic world. Greek and Eastern culture blended to form a new whole, as cities by the name of Alexandria sprang up in almost every land, though without any democracy. All officials in Asia spoke Greek, and new Oriental gods became neighbors with the old Greek ones at Mount Olympus. Alexander was proclaimed a god himself in Egypt. Protocol obliged all to follow Eastern tradition and fall at his feet. We can only wonder at how this might have ended. Greek decrees have been found urging the spread of Buddhism, but Alexander died young. Babylon, the place of his death, had become the capital of an empire, which immediately began to crack at the seams. While the successors of Alexander warred with one another, a new ambitious power was growing in the West. In 146 BC, the Romans conquered Greece, and in 30 BC, they conquered the last stronghold of Hellenism, Egypt. But Greek culture was victorious even here. Spread by the Romans, it finally conquered the world. Romans began to read the Iliad and Odyssey in Greek, followed by the Greek New Testament too. In 330, Emperor Constantine built a new city on the site of the old Greek colony of Byzantium, Constantinople. This was the starting point for the history of the Byzantine Empire, which extended the life of Greek culture another 1,000 years, leaving us the weird Russian alphabet, for instance.